have five items on the agenda for today. So the first one is I'm just going to go over a bit of an overview of what Infor's document management tool is. We're going to discuss some of the critical features and then capabilities of IDM. We're also going to talk about an automated saving process for reports generated in Sightline. I'll give you guys a few tips on how to get started with permissions and setup, and then we'll end with a demonstration of 4 different business cases and ways to use IDM in Sightline. So one thing I wanted to note is that we have customers that are both in the cloud and customers that are both on-prem. So if you are in the cloud, you already have IDM for free in your system. So if this is something you want to get started on later, you can probably get started on that today with the information you'll gain through this webinar. And then my goal for today is that you guys walk away from today's session with some more ideas on how you can utilize the functionality in IDM and then make document management easier for your team. So we'll get started. And as Con mentioned, I might not be able to check the chat while I'm presenting, but I have a question section at the end. So if you have any questions, happy to answer them. And thanks for joining. All right, so IDM, if you haven't heard of it, stands for Infor Document Management, and it's the document management solution that's used across the Infor ecosystem, including Sightline. So at its core, IDM acts as a bit of a central repository for all of your documents. So instead of storing files across multiple locations, or maybe you have shared OneDrives, IDM's a way that you can bring everything together in one kind of controlled and searchable space. So IDM also gives you access and security control, so you can define who's allowed to create, edit, view, or delete documents, and that helps you ensure that you have proper document governance and compliance at all times. The other thing that IDM is great for is it helps you manage the entire life cycle of your documents. So whether you're storing them, searching them, or even reusing documents, you can set up archiving rules, which we'll cover a bit today as well, to make it easier to manage your documents in the long term. One cool thing about IDM is that it isn't just limited to documents that are created in Sightline, but you can actually store a wide range of content from images, videos, sound files, or any other type of files that you're used to using at your organization. And for this reason, it allows you to store everything related to a process, a job, an SRO, or a project in Sightline, or you can attach it to any records in Sightline. So you can keep all of your business documents together or files. Another thing that's really awesome about IDM is that if you have drawings, as I mentioned earlier, that you want to link to items, or maybe you have contracts, you can link them to customers, or same with images, you can link them to quality reports or jobs. So that's a great way to keep everything organized in the context that it applies to within information that you're already tracking in Sightline. Okay, if you're interested in the IDM architecture and how it works, I have a little image here on the screen for you to see. So Infor Document Management actually sits outside of Sightline, but it connects through the Infor OS platform. So Sightline doesn't store documents directly in its own database unless you're already using the attached documents functionality in Sightline, which is available. That's separate from IDM, so I like to point that out as well, just because sometimes people can get them confused. So instead, IDM stores references, the technical term for its metadata, that points to where documents live in IDM. So you can think of Sightline as the system that's going to use the documents, while IDM is the system that's going to store and manage them. So a little overview of how it would work. So essentially, Sightline's going to send a request to IDM through ION, which is what you can see over here through the arrows pointing. And then IDM is going to check for user permissions. And if the user has the right permissions, IDM is going to return the document back to Sightline, and that'll be displayed in the in-context widget, which we'll go over a little bit. And from there, you can display the document or download it. So I recognize that a lot of you on the call here today may not have seen IDM before, and you may not be aware of where to locate it in system. And so I wanted to put a quick screenshot of one of the main IDM screens and what you can expect to see. So when you're trying to locate IDM, if you're in the cloud or if you're in your shared tenant, you'd actually come over here to the navigation menu, or as I like to call it, the calculator button, because it has 9 buttons like a calculator. But you can click on this one over here, and that's going to bring you to the drop-down list where you can click, I believe it's see more applications or view more applications, and IDM should be listed below. If you don't see that in the cloud currently in your tenant, it's oftentimes due to permissions, so I'll cover that at the end of today's call as well, but that's where you would access it. And then you can see up at the top that I have my OS application open. That's where you manage security permissions and some other features. I have Sightline up at the top. That's where I'd access Sightline. And then Document Management, it's a separate tab, kind of like Sightline, and this is where you can manage your documents over here. So one cool thing that I like about IDM is that any document that you view, you don't actually have to click on it, download or open it. It always gives you a thumbnail. So I purposely picked a colorful photo here to show, but this is just a wirings diagram, and you can see all the colors here. So it's nice that you can get a snapshot of the document before you end up working with it. There's some features over here at the top that we'll talk about, and you can add documents through the application this way as well. So yeah, when I get into the demonstration later, it should tie in a little bit more. The other thing that I want to cover today is just terminology that you're going to hear throughout today's session, and then as you start to explore IDM on your own later. So there's 6 main terms that are pretty new if you've been using Sightline for a long time, and things that you might not have heard of before, so I'm going to go over them. The first one is ACL. You might see ACL in the workbook or as you're reading documentation on IDM. ACL stands for Access Control List. And you can think of the access control list as the user permissions for IDM records. So it's just another term that you could use for user permissions. The next one would be attributes. Attributes, the technical term of it is the metadata that's used to store characteristics of a record, but an attribute, you can think of that would be the customer number. It's something unique to the document or unique to a record in Sightline that sets it apart from other documents. So you wouldn't want to use city per se as an attribute. You could if you wanted to, but it wouldn't be a great attribute to use just because there's many customers that could have the same city, but the customer ID would be a great attribute to use, or the customer number. So that's going to be key fields that help you store your document in the correct context of where it should be in association to a Sightline record. The next term that we'll cover a lot is document. Most of us are probably familiar with the word document, but in Sightline, it just means that it's a file wrapped with properties, attributes, and security settings. So each document that you store in Sightline or IDM is going to have its own template, and that comes from, the template also ties in with the permissions in terms of who can access and view the document. I've talked a lot about viewing documents, but I haven't talked yet about the business context model. So the business context model, you might hear that term as well throughout today, but that's essentially the rules for where the document should pop up in the correct context in Sightline or within document management itself. And then document type, which I touched on a little bit. A document type would be a template. So you could set up document types if you have your own. So maybe it might be standard operating procedures could be a document type. You could have, if you send out weekly newsletters, you could have a newsletter as a document type. It doesn't just have to be Sightline document types like the purchase order confirmation report or the order verification report. You can create your own unique document types that your business uses as well. And the last one that I'll touch on as well will be the related documents widget, which you're going to get to see at the end of today's session. But the related documents widget is essentially a pane that opens up beside Sightline to display the documents that are related to the record that you're looking at. And it can be helpful because you get rather than going into IDM, you get a snapshot while you're in Sightline of the related documents. Okay, lots of terminology. All right. So this is another slide just to give you a little bit more information about what a document is in the context of IDM. So this slide explains how IDM treats and organizes its documents. In IDM, I mentioned it earlier, but a document is more than just a file. So you have your properties and you have your attributes and you have your access control settings, which we covered earlier. But the document type that you create can be different. So you can see that I have some sound files over here. I have some videos. You can pretty much turn any type of file that you have into a document. Oftentimes the document types are going to align with your real business processes, which I think I mentioned earlier as well. Okay. So one thing that IDM is great for is it includes version control. So every time a document is updated, a new version of that document is going to be stored, which I have a little slide to show you in a second here. But users can always go back and see who made changes to a document and what time the document was changed. That can be really helpful because what I've seen a lot of is people will have shared file folders within their organization, and I'll see V1, V2, V3 draft grace. I'm guilty of doing that myself. So by having the version control settings, it's really helpful to make sure that you're working on the most up-to-date document. And the other thing that's really helpful is you can actually go back a version as well. So this is all managed through the check-in and checkout process, which is going to prevent conflicts. So only one person can edit a document at a time, and that ensures that changes don't override each other. So users can always know that they're working with the most current and accurate version of a document. This is really important because it's going to reduce the errors that you have, and it's going to keep the process consistent. Um, One thing that's really important about this functionality is that it helps you stay audit ready, and it can be really valuable when you have audits because any auditor that you have can see the full history of edits, approvals, and comments. And then it takes a bit of the stress off of your users in Sightline because they can confidently demonstrate how the document control process works, and they can show that there's a record for changes or approvals if needed. So I have a little slide here on what this looks like, and I'll go over an example later today in document management where we're actually going to edit a document and then see the versions update. But essentially over here, when you view an item, here's my checkout button up at the top. So I could check out this document, and then here's the versions. So the first version, second, and third. The other thing that I mentioned is that you can revert to an old version. So if something went wonky with a version that was changed or someone made accidental edits or the wrong document was worked on, you can revert it back to the old version. So that helps for not losing work. All right. I talked a little bit about the different ways to access documents in Sightline, but over here in Sightline, there's three ways that I see people using documents and accessing them. The first is that in-context widget. This is your first sneak peek at what that looks like. It's called the Related Information V2 widget, and here there's a little thumbnail of the document tied to the record in Sightline. So most people prefer to look at their in-context documents through the widget in Sightline because most people are working in Sightline. The other way is to use the search filters that are available in IDM. So I can search for all of my customer purchase orders that are either created by me or not created by me. I can click the search button, and then there's different ways to filter. So you can filter by most recent documents, and we'll go over a little bit of that later as well. And then you can also manage documents, as I mentioned earlier, with checking them out, downloading them, saving them as a new document, adding them to your favorites, or printing them. Okay, so I talked about the ACL or access control list, but you haven't seen an example of what that looks like yet. So essentially, the good thing about the access control list is that it ties to the groups that you have set up in Sightline or in Infor OS. So I have the manager role for purchasing here. I'm allowing the manager to read, edit, create, check in, but I'm not allowing them to check it out in this case, but you can control what you want user groups to be able to do. So or who could access it as well. So the good thing about this is that it syncs to your current Sightline permissions that you have set up. So if a user works in production, but they want to view financial reports, they would not be able to use the widget or search in IDM to see any documents. So that's great for security. And the good thing about this as well is that it means that you don't have to manage security in two separate spaces. So the user roles and the user access rights are going to stay consistent across both of your platforms, which is great. Okay. So there's a couple ways to add files or to add documents into Sightline. One is to use the paperclip button in the widget itself to add a file. This one's great because if you're on a specific record in Sightline, as long as you have the document template rules set up, when you click add file, it's going to add it to the specific record that you're on, and it's going to form that association rules for you. So in this case, I have a little screenshot of it here, but I'm attaching the customer purchase order, and the document type that I have is the customer purchase order. So if I was to scroll down on this, it would show me that it's attaching it to the specific customer order that I'm on in Sightline, which is great. So if I click on other customer orders, it's not going to pop up unless it's directly related to that customer order. So that's one way to store files. So that would be, you can either click the paperclip to add a file, or you can drag and drop them into this. I'll show you the drag and drop method later. The other one would be through the back end of the system by clicking the Add Documents button up on the toolbar, and then you can select which document type. So if you had business-specific document type set up, let's say that you had an SOP, you could select that you're uploading a type of SOP, and then you could upload your document that way as well. And then another one that we're going to cover today is the automatic workflows in Sightline. So if you're already used to saving documents, so let's say that every time you print an invoice, you have document saving rules set up so that all of those invoices in Sightline get saved to a file folder somewhere. There's workflows in Sightline. There's about 40, which I'll cover in a bit, and they'll automatically save copies of those important documents that you're already generating in Sightline to IDM. Okay, so some additional features that we're not going to get too into today, but it's good to know, is that IDM offers a dedicated mobile application. So in other words, there's an app on your phone that you can use. And this is a great way to give users quick access to documents from their phones or tablets at workstations, especially if you have team members that are working on the shop floor or in the field or in remote locations. They can take photos of things, they can view documents like SOPs or job instructions, anything that's important to them, they can view them on their mobile phone or tablet. So there's an iOS app and there's also an Android app for that. IDM also lets you directly email documents from within your system, so you don't need to download files first or jump between your own file folder system, or if you have another platform where you're managing documents, you can email them directly from IDM or even through the V2 widget, which I'll touch on in a little bit. I mentioned it as well earlier, I think, but I'm not sure if I covered it extensively, but it's good to know that there's automated retention policies, so you can control how long documents are stored in Sightline, and you can also set up rules to automatically archive or delete based on classification, age, or business process. So this is going to help you reduce clutter in your system, but also ensure that if you have documents for accounting purposes that you need to keep for 7 years, you can set rules about that as well. Okay. So I mentioned workflows, but I'm not sure if you've heard of workflows or not, but I'm doing a lot of yapping, so you can give me a thumbs up in the I guess section of the chat if you know about document workflows or if you've heard about that before. It'd be good to see if anyone's heard of that or if anyone's using them or if it's all new. It might all be new. All right. Georgie's seen it and Catherine. Awesome. Thanks, guys. Okay, so lots of people haven't heard of IDM workflows before, but I'll cover what those are. So in Sightline, you have your reports and your documents that users will generate. So that would be something like a purchase order or an order verification report, maybe an invoice or a job packet. So what you can do with workflows is there's about 40 in Sightline, but you can turn on a checkbox to say that you would like to automatically save a copy of whatever the report you're generating in Sightline directly to IDM. So this helps you not have to manually store documents, and then it makes sure that if you have a user that maybe accidentally forgets to download a copy of the report before sending it to a customer, it takes away the stress of basically allowing you to do all of that yourself. So when a document's printed or reprinted as well, that will get sent. So I talked earlier about the version controls, but let's say that you have an order verification report and you print it off the first time and there's 2 line items. The customer makes a change and then you delete a line. If you print the report again, you'll be able to see 2 versions of what happened with that customer order. So that's another nice feature to having them automatically save for you as well. So you can access this through using the IDM document workflows form. So here's an example of one that I turned on here, but essentially you would just come over here and we'll actually go over this in a demonstration, so it'll be a little bit easier to see. But you'd come over to this form and you'd turn it on. So let's say that I want to start tracking change orders. I could click yes on the change orders, click yes to turn it on and make it active, and then it's going to automatically save a copy of any change order report that I print. This might be a little bit ahead for most people and where we're at today for the webinar, but the slides will be available afterwards. So if you're doing any testing and you want to try making your own document workflow, or you want to make sure that it's going to flow correctly, here's the steps or everything that you need to have to make sure that it would work. So you'd need to make sure that you have the related information widget set up so that you can add files this way. You also want to make sure that you have a document type in IDM created. So a lot of these are already pre-created, which is great. You can utilize them. If you wanted to make your own custom one, you'd have to set this up. That would be this process here of building your own workflow. And then you need to make sure that there's a business context model rule that's created. So essentially you have a rule that tells the document where it should go. And if you have any other extra form external message entities, which is probably too technical for today, but you could set that up if you're trying to make your own custom workflow. Okay, so if you're looking at all of the stuff that we've talked about today and you're thinking that you'd like to get started with it, there's about 5 things that you should watch out for or look for. So the first one I mentioned would be to review the user permissions in OS security. So if you're an administrator, you can do this yourself. If you're not an administrator, I would follow up with your administrator. I'll go over what those permissions are and what to look for. But if you're not seeing IDM in that drop-down list of other applications and it's not where Sightline is when you click on Sightline or Factory Track, there's a good chance that the only reason you're not seeing it is because you don't have the permissions assigned. So I'll go over what those permissions are in the next slide. The next one would be to make sure that your related information context app or the widget is downloaded, that you've set up any additional document types that you're going to use, and that you've turned on the document workflows that you want to utilize. And the last thing is if you're looking for more information, Infor's documentation library is pretty great. So if you right-click on any of the IDM forms or if you right-click on any form in Sightline, it'll take you to the Infor's documentation library. You can search for IDM-related content in that section over there, as well as use any workbooks if you have Infor Campus or online resources as well. I've seen quite a few good videos out there on IDM. And if you want more information, you can reach out to ESS or reach out to me, and happy to help you guys with any questions that you have. Okay, this slide might be a little small for people to see, so I'll just read out what they are, but the main thing to watch for when you go into OS and when you're looking for IDM security rules would be the IDM administrator, the IDM advanced user, there's the IDM related information user, and then signature. There's DocuSign functionality with IDM, which I won't cover today, but that's good to know as well. Super user, and then a regular user. So most of your end users will get the IDM user role, and they'll also get the IDM related information user role. Those are 2 that they need, and anyone else doing setup in IDM should just have all of the roles assigned to them. I talked about setting up the related context widget app, but some people might not know where that is. So in Sightline, over to the side, if you're in the cloud, you'll see this button. It's a rectangle with 2 other squares. I don't know what else to call it other than it's the widget button. So if anyone has a creative name for me, I'd love to hear it later. But you can click on the widget button over here, and then you can create an insight group called IDM. It'll ask you to create an insight group. There's actually lots of widgets that you can use. So I just recommend creating your own IDM insight group and then adding the related information v2 widget this way. So you can see I have a group down here for IDM, but because there's multiple different types of widgets, you could have a group for purchasing, for example, where you see all your purchasing related widgets, but we're only going to focus on IDM today, but sometimes that can be confusing. So that's the order of events for setting up related information widget. All right, and then the last one would be how to create new document types. So you can go over here and create new document type this way. And there's a couple of steps. You can see the status bar over here. So there's a couple of steps on what to fill out, and you're going to be guided through that. And you can click next. So each document type is going to need a few sets of criteria. You're going to need to have the document type name. You're going to need to have the ACL or the access control for who can access the document. You'll need to set up those saving rules. You'll need to have the name of the document, ID, the type, the size, and then any attributes for relating it in the context of the widget. Okay. That's it for the slides, but I do have a demonstration as well, so I can get into the demonstration, or if there's any questions that popped up from this PowerPoint presentation, you can just let me know.
So we have 3 questions so far, Grace. The first question is from Thomas. Does the mobile version work with Infor CSI field service as well? That's the question.
Okay. Let's see, I'm just checking opening up the chat here as well. So Infor Field Service is its own separate app. So if you're using IDM and if you're attaching documents, typically those documents get tied back to the SROs, but you can work with it. So does the field service app act as IDM per se? No, you would still need a document management app. But if you are taking pictures of things and those are tied to SROs, for example, or service orders, then if you're in IDM, you should be able to see the documents that are tied to the service order that way. But they're going to be two separate apps, if that answers that question. For the auditing process, there's
Mhm.
actually an auditor role that you can use in Sightline, and you can assign to an auditor so that they have access to view information in Sightline and in IDM, but they wouldn't have access to edit and change any of your documents. So essentially, it's a bit of a role that you would assign. So you would have to create a user for the auditor if they're on site, and they'd need to check it.
Mhm. Um,
When a document is created, is there a rule to prompt a document control number to be assigned? I might need a little bit more information on what you mean by a document control number for that one, but all of the documents are going to have their own unique ID. If you're talking about like I don't know, maybe Kendall, could you give a little more information on what you mean by that question?
so we have two more questions. What's the maximum file size allowed for attachment? Maybe while we wait for Kendall.
Okay. The maximum file size, I'm actually not sure on the top of my head what the maximum file size is, so I'll have to look at that. And then we collect documents from our vendors and need to store them. Currently, the only storage is done through DocTrack. Can IDM be used to store and link the document to the purchase order lines? Yes, you could. Is it Lewis? You could use IDM instead of DocTrack to store and link documents to the purchase order lines. I'll show an example of linking something to the customer order lines. But I'll have to get back to you on the maximum file size as well. Oh, Kendall got back. So for ISO programs, we have document ID numbers, but each file has its own unique number. That should be sufficient, I think. Okay. Yeah, each document does have its own ID number. So you might be able to see a little bit more of that. But if you have more specific questions, let me know later. It might be covered or it might be shown today. All right.
Okay.
I will switch over to Sightline and then maybe end it for questions for now here. But if there's more questions that come up at the end of my demonstration, we can also have a chance to answer those as well.
Yep, sure.
All right, got to flip away from the PowerPoint and into Sightline. So just give me 1 second.
Mhm.
All right. Okay, so hopefully you can see my screen and you can see Sightline on my end, but to get to document management, you'd click the navigation menu over here, and then, as I mentioned earlier, the applications would be down here. So document management is its own application, just like Sightline. So if I click on it, it's going to take me over here. So I'm going to cover 4 things today. What I want to cover with you guys is showing you how the document workflows work in IDM, showing you how to attach a document through the widget, showing you how the editing and version control works, and then also showing you how to send an email from Sightline as well. So the first one that we can cover is editing the document in version control. So if you want to filter for any documents, you can over here. I just have mine ready to go for the example to speed things up today, but I have an example of a newsletter here. It's just a template, but if I click on it to check it out, yeah, the file size is here and the ID is here. So if this ID answers your question a little bit more, Kendall, there is a unique ID for each document. I can actually see over in history the versions, and I can click on any of the version and get information about it. But for the sake of today, I'm going to check out this document. And what it's going to do is it's going to open it up for me. So I'll open it in Word. And I'll bring it over here. Oop. Popped over to the other screen. Okay, and what I'll do is I'll just change, let's see if I can change the color of the text here so you can see it saved. But if you wanted to make any changes to this document, let's say it's no longer welcome back to school, but it's something else, you can finish it and then you can save the document. And I just changed it red for the sake of today, but I won't get into to too much of changing it. And then after you're done saving it or you've made any changes to the document that you want, you can close it. And then I can check in the document. And then over here, you can see up at the top that it's changed it. The reason I just changed the colors is probably because it's the easiest thing to see rather than changing the text. It's harder to see the text, but any changes that you make to the document, it'll change the thumbnail that you see as well. And then you get a new version history with a new date. If I wanted to revert back to the other version, I could click on this button here as well. And then it says the current document will be discarded. If you wanted to get rid of it, say the changes weren't good, you can click yes or you can click no. There's information about the security. So if you're not sure at first glance, in this case, it's public, so everybody can see this one. There's information about the file itself and the file size. Here's the attributes that I talked about earlier. So I mentioned that there's an attribute for the customer number. So this is my customer number. I'm in a multi-site environment. So the accounting entity is the site that I'm in. I'm in LA. And then over here, the type of document it is, it's a customer general document. And there's properties for the document here as well. But each document does get its own unique ID, which should help with compliance in that sense. So that would be if you wanted to take a look at it. The other thing you could do is save it as a new document, download it, print it, add it to your favorites, archive it, and then send it in an email. If you wanted to add more documents, you can come over here and add them this way. So that's one way. It'll ask you what document type that you're going to use, and then you can tell it which document type. But that probably covers at a quick glance, because I know we don't have a ton of time to go through everything, that probably covers at a quick glance how that looks. But you can see that the changes that I made updated the document and that we got a new version the time that it was made. So that's my first example for today. The next thing that I want to show you is the purchase order workflows in Sightline. So I'm going to go over to Sightline. And I mentioned that there's the IDM workflows form. Which it looks like it's really slow to load. There we go. Okay. So over here, I'm going to come down here and I'm going to take a look and I'm going to see that I have all the purchase order reports that I'm going to print. They're all saved here. So if I click on the purchase order report, I can see that it's active and that it's good to go. If I was to deselect it, it wouldn't save a copy when I print off a purchase report. But now that I have it over here, it will save a copy. So what I'll do in document management is I will filter for the purchase order. And then you can see all of the purchase orders. So some were created by Mitch, one was created by me. And what I'll do in Sightline is I'm going to go over to the purchase orders form and I'm going to print off the purchase order report for this. I just made a test one right before. So I'll click purchase order report and I'll click the print button. And then that's going to print off on the other side. And when this report's loaded up, we can go back to Sightline. It takes a second, and then we can see that purchase order report in document management. So it looks like it did, it's blank right now, but it looks like it did print off. So over in document management, if I refresh this, let's see, I might have to reload it again. here's my test purchase order. So it automatically saved it here. So this is my PO, so IDM webinar. And then if I come over back here to the purchase order, and if I refresh, it does pop up the purchase orders tied to the customer order here as well. So there's the purchase order that I just printed off. So if you wanted to view the purchase order this way, rather than having to locate the report, you can click on it and then it opens it up beside. This one's a bad report just because I don't have a ton of lines or information in it, but you get the idea. So that would be how that document workflow works. These are already available to you, so you don't need to customize anything to get that working. But that's an example of how the IDM document workflows will just save your documents once you turn them on, and you can see them over here in document management. And it has the date that it was created, or if it was modified, it has information on that as well. Okay. So the other thing that I wanted to show, close down this form. So I wanted to show an example of how to attach a document. So I have a customer order here in this case, and I have one line over here. So I want to add a document to this customer order. So right now it's saying that I have no related information. That's okay. I don't have any related information. So I have a purchase order. Here's my chair over here for the customer, and this came from them. It's just a fake one, but I'm going to try to attach the customer's original purchase order to the customer. So I'll come over here back to Sightline. And I'm going to drag and drop it over here, which I might need to close this and then reopen my widget. Sorry. Unless it's not going to work right now, but it was just earlier. Okay, there we go. Yes, I need to refresh it because it had been sitting open for a while. But here's that newsletter that, if you remember back in document management, I'll go to recently modified. Over here, I had as the attribute that it was tied to this customer number over here. So this is a general document for the customer, but I can see it because I'm on this customer number here. So this document's popping up. The other thing that's popping up is the order verification report. So I can click on that and see it. But here's the order verification report that I went ahead and printed earlier for their reinforced aluminum frame. And then if I come back over here to Sightline, I can click the file folder button. And when I click this, I won't click on it just for confidentiality reasons, but if I click on this, it's going to open up my file folders and all my documents that I use are going to pop up. So instead, what I'll do for this one is I'm going to drag and drop that purchase order that I talked about earlier over here. It's going to ask me if it's a general doc, but I'm going to say actually it's the customer purchase order copy. So it's the one that they sent me. And then I'm going to view the additional details. And down here, you can see that it's tying it to this customer order here. So customer AL001. So I'll click upload. And now I can see that purchase order that originally came from that customer order. Okay. So we covered off the IDM document workflows. We covered off seeing the purchase order report printed off, and in IDM, we also covered off the newsletter and then some version and editing control. So the last thing that I wanted to cover today would just be how to email these documents. So let's say that the customer goes, wait a second, can you send me that document because I lost my original purchase order and I don't think I actually ordered that. I don't know, you might have something like that that pops up. You can email any documents through the widget over here. So if you click on this arrow, it says send an email. So I'll click send an email, and then I'm going to send it to myself. I'm going to say it's the purchase order copy, and I'm going to say, oops. Okay, I'll say, please see your original purchase order, and then see down here where it says the high school customer purchase order number, blah, 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 PDF. That's just saying that it's going to email this one. You can do this document or any other documents that you have. So I'll click send, and then it's going to take a second to get to my inbox, but I'll pull up that email from my inbox and then show you guys that email as well before we end things off today. All right. So I'm just going to stop sharing my screen so that I can pull up the email, and then I'll reshare again. Okay. So I just got the email sent to me over here, but this is an example of how it would look like. So here's the PDF, and then it just says the subject is the purchase order copy, and then here's the message that I sent. So it has my username, and it says shared the following documents, and then here's my message. So what I've seen people do before is they've said, please email me back at my email, gmckay@esoft.com, and then any other context that they want. But if you click on this one as well, it'll open up. So here's the purchase order back again. All right. That's it for things that I wanted to share in IDM, but I'm sure you guys might have a couple questions, so I want to leave a little bit of time to answer any questions. So if you have questions, you can type them in the chat or unmute yourself and ask any questions that way as well.
Okay, I don't see any other question, but maybe we can wait. So while we can wait, and I would like to remind, okay, I'll come to that. We have one question, Grace. If you're on-prem, is it required that we move to the cloud?
It's not required that you move to the cloud to use Infor Document Management. Infor Document Management is also available on-prem. It might look slightly different than the cloud version, but you can also have it on-prem. No problem. The only bummer is that you have to pay for it when you're on-prem as opposed to in the cloud, it's free. All right, there's another question. In your example for attaching the customer PO, can you access this document within IDM as well? Yes, you can access that document within IDM as well. So let's see if I can show what that would look like. So let me know if I'm answering your question or not. So one thing that you can filter for is documents like recently printed or recently created. You could also filter for the purchase order itself. Or customer purchase order. Oh, I see. You're asking if you see it. Not the purchase order I created, but the customer PO. That one would be here as well. So I had one that I had as a customer's general documents. So let's see. I think I attached it here, customer purchase order. So over here, I had a document type set up in my system for customer document. I can't talk today, sorry, for customer purchase order copies. And then I just filtered over here for customer purchase order copies, and then it pulled this one up. But these are all the other customer purchase order copies that I have. So you can view them that way. And then if I wanted to do anything with it here or make any edits or modifications, edit it, draw on it, send it back. I can also check it out, do anything I would need to do with it. And you can also send it in an email this way as well. So you don't have to send emails just through the widget. You can also send emails when you're working with the document here as well. So I could do the same thing that I did before if I marked it up and made changes this way.